Please be seated. The court is now in session. This morning, the Chamber will continue to hear the testimony of the witness, Richard Dartmouth, via video conference from the United States of America. And Ms. Jie Huang, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to today's proceedings? The graphic. Mr. President, for today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. As for Noon Jie, he is present in the holding cell downstairs, as he requests to waive his right to be present in the courtroom. His waiver has been delivered to the greffier. The witness who is to continue his testimony today, that is Mr. Richard Dartmouth, by a video conference from the United States of America. The AV unit informs the greffier that the link has been connected and the witness is ready to testify. Thank you, Mr. President. President, thank you, Ms. Jie Huang. The Chamber now decides on the request by Noon Jie. The Chamber has received a waiver from Noon Jie, dated 31st March 2015. He confirms that due to his health problem, that is, headache, back pain, and that he cannot sit for long, and in order to effectively participate in the future hearings, he requests to waive his right to participate in and be present at the 31st March 2015 hearing. He has been informed by his counsel about the consequence of this waiver, that in no way it can be construed as a waiver of his right to be tried fairly or to challenge evidence presented or admitted to this court at any time during this trial. Having seen the medical report by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC, dated 31st March 2015, who notes that the health condition of Noon Jie is that he still has his chronic back pain and he cannot sit for long, and recommends that the Chamber shall grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from a holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the Chamber grants Noon Jie his request to follow the proceedings remotely from a holding cell downstairs by an audio-visual means for today's proceedings, as he waives his direct presence in the courtroom. The AV unit is instructed to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Noon Jie can participate in and follow today's proceedings remotely. Mr. President, good morning, Mr. Richard Dartmouth.
Good morning.
Today, the Chamber will continue to hear your testimony, and there will be questions by the defense teams.
And
Mr. Richard Dartmouth, are you ready?
I am ready. Yes, I am ready.
Thank you. And the Chamber would like now to give the floor to the defense teams. And Counsel, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning, Council. Good evening, Mr. Dutman.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm about to finish my examination, and as indicated to you yesterday, I would like to finish with listening with you to an audio tape of an interview or speech that Pol Pot has given to you and Elizabeth Becker in December 1978. Now, Mr. Dutman, I believe you received yesterday through your counsel a transcript of the about 9.5 minutes of the interview. Is that indeed correct? And if yes, have you been able to read it?
I have read it and I listened to an audio version of it, of most of it, before this session began.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dutman. Mr. President, for the benefit of Nuon Chia and also for the benefit of the public, I would like to ask your permission to have this 9.5 minute audio tape played in the courtroom. I believe the AV unit is ready if you grant the request to play the audio. Maybe one warning to accompany my request. The quality is not always that good. It seems that when Pol Pot is speaking in Khmer, his words are quite soft, and when Tune Prasit is translating, the words are loud. So I hope it goes well. So again, my request to have your permission.
Your request is granted, and the AV unit, please play the audio file as requested by Council Coupe.
If we can say, in a situation of peace, the building up of our country and could be more rapidly, and also we could have more possibility to build up rapidly.
ប៉ុន្តែសភាពការនៃកម្ពុជាប្រជាធិបតេយ្យបច្ចុប្បន្នដូចជាលោកនឹងសញ្ញាទៀតហើយសកលលោកក៏បានយល់គឺកម្ពុជាប្រជាធិបតេយ្យបានកំពុងត្រូវរងគ្រោះដោយយូរជាទៀត
But the present situation in democratic Cambodia, as you are aware of, and the world opinion also is aware of, is that democratic Cambodia is under the aggression of the Vietnamese.
ការលោកទាំងមូលចាប់អារម្មណ៍ក្នុងពេលបច្ចុប្បន្នអំពីការឈានពានរបស់យួនមកលើកម្ពុជាជាពិសេសហើយកំពុងព្រួយបារម្ភចំពោះការវិលុករបស់យួនមកលើកម្ពុជាក្រែងទៅកម្ពុជាទប់ទល់នឹងយួនមិនបានហើយប៉ះពាល់ទៅដល់អាស៊ីអាគ្នេយ៍និងប៉ះពាល់ទៅដល់សេដ្ឋកិច្ចនៅអាស៊ី
The whole world opinion paid great attention on the Vietnamese aggression against democratic Cambodia.
Stop the nothing.
There are
President, please pause. And Council Coupe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm also directing my remarks to the AV unit. It is the excerpt that starts at minute 33:15. I believe they were accordingly instructed, and I heard something completely different, so I'm not quite sure where they are. It is document D28R, starting at minute 33:15.
Every unit, please play this segment as indicated by Councillor Coupe at 33 minute 15 second time mark. Thank you.
Kata kemat di percikan oleh kompetitif. Dia terpengkat penerapan nium Soviet dari Pak Sempan Pak Sovi kemudian dia kata kemat.
As for the fact that Vietnam wanted to rely on the international expansionist Soviet or the Warsaw Pact, it's not a determinant factor.
Kata kemat di percikan oleh kompetitif.
The determinant factor is the people in Vietnam, in the country.
Vietnam Soviet antara Vietnam Soviet dan Pak Sempan Pak Soviet lebih cepat di Cambodia dan Asia.
The internationalist expansionist Soviet and the Warsaw Pact are very far from Cambodia.
Nom top mau pinung dan bayi-bayi Cambodia terlalu keternakan.
If they wanted to send the army to aggress Cambodia, they have to carry them for a long distance.
Terhadapអ្វីៗទាំងអស់មកពីព្រោះគ្មានអីពឹងពាក់នៅខាងវៀតណាម
And they have to transport everything from their country because they can rely on anything in Vietnam.
Vietnam អត់បាយស៊ីខ្លួនវា
Because Vietnam has not enough to feed itself.
ទីប្រឹក្សាសូវៀតច្រើនកាន់តែលំបាកឲ្យយើង
And the more Soviet advisors are in Vietnam, the more difficulties Vietnam face.
បើបញ្ជូនកងទ័ពរបស់បកសម្ព័ន្ធបកសូវីមកទៀតរឹតតែលំបាកឲ្យប្រជាជនវៀតណាម
And if the Soviet Union send the army of the Warsaw Pact in Vietnam, it would have more difficulties for the Vietnamese people.
នេះមួយយ៉ាងហើយមួយយ៉ាងទៀតបកសម្ព័ន្ធបកសូវីក៏ត្រូវប្រឈមមុខនឹងកតិកាសញ្ញាអត្លង់តិកខាងជើង
On the other side, the Warsaw Pact has also to face the NATO.
វិទ្យានិយមអន្តរជាតិសូវៀតនិងបកសម្ព័ន្ធបកសូវីមកវាយកម្ពុជានិងអាស៊ីនេះត្រូវគិតគូរអឺរ៉ុប
If the internationalist expansionist Soviet and the Warsaw Pact want to come and aggress Cambodia and the Southeast Asia country, they have to think about European countries also, to take in consideration the European countries, Western.
សភាពការនៅអឺរ៉ុបខាងកើតមិនមែនជាសភាពការនឹងនោ មានស្ថិរភាពហើយវិទ្យានិយមអន្តរជាតិសូវៀតស្ងប់ចិត្តវាកំពុងមានបារម្ភដល់ដកកម្លាំងនេះប្រជិញប្រទេសទៅមកវាយលើខាងកម្ពុជានៅនេះក៏ត្រូវចោទនៅខាងអឺរ៉ុប
The situation in East Europe is not stable. It is not favorable for the internationalist expansionist Soviets. The Soviets are anxious also about this situation. If they want to withdraw some armed forces from the East Europe for the Southeast Asia, they have also to be anxious. Worry. Why? Worry. You have to be also worried.
Yang kit Cambodia cái đây cái tương lai là gì cái đây cái tương lai là gì nó sau lúc cái đấy mình sẽ chấp hỏi sự việc tại sân vận và sự việc mà do Cambodia mình do là gì thì ban tặng.
Besides Cambodia and the Southeast Asia countries, the Asian countries and the countries throughout the world do not accept that the Soviet and the Warsaw Pact take possession of Cambodia or Southeast Asia at their will.
Bởi nó việc nhằm việc thiệt là duyên thiên tiên Campuchia đòi hùm mình tham gia từ dục sắc thì mùi cái tin dùng anh đã biết đang被អនុវត្តយុទ្ធសាស្ត្រសហព័ន្ធចិនរបស់វាយុទ្ធសាស្ត្របណ្ដាញយកវាត្រូវប្រាជិញអូមក
So we accept that Vietnam, in aggressing Cambodia, in connivance with the Soviet expansionists, in order to carry out to achieve the Indochina Federation and to take possession of the Southeast Asia, has met with heavy defeat this year.
Vì tranh nguồn nhà về công cung chung bring sự kiềm viên kiềm Campuchia tỏ được tiếp đói thật không hạt nông vật sập con khi vô kinh Campuchia promote pak sempan masuri merawai Campuchia.
Although this heavy defeat, Vietnam is pushing forward its war of aggression and internationalize the war of aggression in gathering the Warsaw Pact countries to aggress Cambodia. So this problem is not an ordinary problem of border.
ពីការអនុវត្តយុទ្ធសាស្ត្ររបស់យួនសម្រាប់សហព័ន្ធចិនរបស់វានិងយុទ្ធសាស្ត្ររបស់សូវៀតសម្រាប់អាស៊ីអាគ្នេយ៍និងអាស៊ីរបស់វានិងសកលលោករបស់វា
This is the carrying out of the Vietnamese strategy of Indochina Federation and the strategy of the Soviet in Southeast Asia and in the world.
លើស្គាល់រូបឃើញច្បាស់
Now the world is clearly aware of.
ក្នុងបកសម្ព័ន្ធវ៉ាសូវីក៏មានកម្លាំងប្រឆាំងដែរ
And among the Warsaw Pact members, there are also forces who oppose them.
ប្រទេសនានាក្នុងសរុបក៏ប្រឆាំង
And the various countries in the world have opposed also.
Mr. Dutman, have you been able to listen to this audio tape?
Yes.
Of course, I realize it's a long time ago that this interview took place, but does the listening to this interview jog your memory?
No.
Do you remember any reaction at your side in relation to this interview that you had after the interview, or is that simply too long ago?
I don't recall any reaction.
Is there any reaction now at this stage that you can give to the trial chamber about this interview, or am I asking too much now?
I don't get your question.
Is there anything that you would like to say now in reaction to having heard again this interview?
No, I have no comment.
Mr. President, since I have run out of time, I would like to cede the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Dutman. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
President, thank you. And the chamber would like now to give the floor to the co-prosecutors. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening to you, Mr. Dudman. My name is Dale Lysak. I'm one of the international prosecutors, and I will be asking you some questions today.
Good evening.
Yesterday, Nuon Chea's counsel asked you about your capture and detention in Vietnam, or in Cambodia, by Vietnam troops in 1970. And I have just a few follow-ups on that subject. I want to read or reference you to a short excerpt from your book, 40 Days with the Enemy, which is on our case file as E338.17 at S000-23188 through 89, only available in English. And you wrote here that you were generally treated well, with the exception of the first day, when you were treated roughly for a time by Cambodians, in your words, which treatment was halted by authorities of the Liberation Army, who guaranteed your safety if it was verified you were international journalists. Now, I want to follow up on this. When you said that you were treated roughly by Cambodians, who were those people and what did they do to you?
I don't recall.
When you said that you made a reference to the Liberation Army as having intervened and protected you, do you remember who you were referring to by the Liberation Army? Who was it that came in and intervened and protected you?
I don't remember.
Let me move to another subject, Mr. Dutman. I want to ask you a few questions about another issue that came up yesterday, which is the obstacles or limitations you faced as a journalist trying to obtain information when you were in Democratic Kampuchea in December 1978. Yesterday, Mr. Kope Nunche's counsel read to you an excerpt from one of your articles, E3 3290, in which you stated, quote, the visit amounted to a conducted tour with strict limits on conversations with ordinary Cambodians and no opportunity to speak with any but a few top government officials, end of quote. You used that same term yesterday in your testimony when you told defense counsel that your visit was a conducted tour, which you described as pretty unsatisfactory. Can you explain to the court why you called your visit to Democratic Kampuchea a conducted tour, and why, as a journalist, you felt unsatisfied?
I like to ask questions as a journalist and get answers. And that was really impossible at the time. I don't have a great recollection now of those events of nearly 40 years ago, but in reading from my book, it rings a bell, and I can remember the feeling of frustration.
Thank you. I'm going to refer now to document E3/1156. This is a surviving report from Democratic Kampuchea about requests that yourself, though your name is translated in this document as Lidman instead of Dudman, but is a list of requests from yourself, Professor Caldwell, and Elizabeth Becker, which was written by a cadre named Nee Khan. And the fifth request from you in this list was, and I quote, to meet with leaders such as the first Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Ieng Sary, Deputy Prime Minister Son Sen, Ieng Turit, Q Ponery, Brother Nunchea, and King Sihanouk. First, and I realize it was a long time ago, do you have any recollection of meeting a person from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs named Khan?
I do not.
Let me read to you a little of what you wrote in relation to your requests to interview government officials. This is in an article titled Governing in Secret. It is in E3/3290, which is contains a series of articles by you at English ERN 00419-211 and Khmer 0107-0714 through 15. You wrote here about how, despite making repeated requests, the only top government officials you were allowed to meet were Pol Pot and Ieng Sary. And you also stated the following, quote, "I had asked to meet most of the known officials, a total of about 10, including 2 French-educated sisters who are married to Pol Pot and Ieng Sary and held important positions in their own right. I asked in vain to meet the former head of state, Prince Norodom Sihanouk." Continuing below, officials said he had been refusing all requests by visiting delegations who wanted to see him. End of quote. My first question about this, do you remember ever being given a reason for why you could not meet with government officials, leaders such as Nuon Chea, Son Sen, and the wives of Ieng Sary and Pol Pot, Ieng Threat and Q Ponery? Were you ever given a reason as to why you could not meet with those people?
I don't remember. I may have written that something about what reason was given me at the time, but I haven't seen that in reviewing my writings.
Were you ever told while you were in Democratic Kampuchea and in Phnom Penh that Prince Sihanouk was in fact at the royal palace under house arrest?
I don't recall being told that.
Had you previously met Sihanouk in China?
I don't believe so.
I'm going to turn now to an article you wrote titled "Conformity, a Must for Survival in Cambodia." This is E338.19. And in this article, you talked about a visit to a cooperative called Lebo Cooperative in Takao Province. While you were there, you were told that the cooperative included people from Phnom Penh, but you wrote that whenever there were requests to speak with some of them, they always turned out to be away in the rice fields bringing in the harvest. End of quote. You wrote that you were eventually allowed to talk to a man named Net Yan, but you described the circumstances of that interview as follows, quote, "Yan's comments could hardly have been spontaneous. He was interviewed in an otherwise empty communal dining hall with a government official from Phnom Penh doing the interpreting and several other officials and cadres listening in." End of quote. A question, Mr. Dutman, was there anyone in your group, that is amongst yourself, Elizabeth Becker, and Malcolm Caldwell, who was sufficiently fluent in Khmer to understand what people were saying to you, such as this person? Or were you dependent upon the Ministry of Foreign Affairs officials to interpret what was being said to you during these interviews?
I don't remember that, where I got that impression. That I don't remember who it was that told me that.
My question, did you have your own interpreters with you, or did you have to rely on the officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to translate when you conducted interviews?
I don't recall having my own interpreter along with us.
And I realize it was a long time ago. when you were in Labo Cooperative in Takao province, and the district in which Labo is located, Tramcock district, do you remember whether there were local leaders there who met with you?
I don't recall such a meeting.
In your August 1990 article that you were asked about yesterday, E307/5.2.16, despite the control over what you saw and heard during this trip, you wrote the following, quote, "In Phnom Penh and on a 1,000-mile automobile tour, I saw shocking evidence of brutality and regimentation," end of quote. Can you describe to the court in general what it is that you saw during your trip that you considered to be shocking evidence of brutality and regimentation?
I don't remember why I said that or why I wrote that. I have no recollection of what led me to say that.
Let me turn now to another subject that you talked about a little yesterday, which was your attempt to acquire information relating to the food supplies and health of the people in Cambodia. You wrote an article on the 28th of December 1978 titled, "Is Cambodia Starving?" This is document E305/12.58. And in this report, you wrote that you saw no evidence of starvation and that rice production appeared to have increased. But you also provided the following qualification to your statement, and I quote your words. "This conclusion must be tentative. The government refused access to any production or trade specialists for detailed questioning about claimed yields. It likewise ignored repeated requests to take two visiting American reporters to any of the hospitals or small clinics that it says are operating by the score throughout Cambodia, nor would it permit an interview with any public health authority." End of quote. Can you explain why it would have been important to you as a journalist to visit a hospital or to speak to a public health official in order to assess whether people were in fact receiving a sufficient and adequate diet in democratic Kampuchea?
I was trying to establish truth.
What type of things would you look for? What type of questions might you have asked if you had been allowed to go to a hospital or to meet with a public health official?
I have a hard time placing myself back in that situation. I don't know what I would have asked, but I would have thought of some appropriate questions to try to get at the truth of what kind of health care they had.
Mr. Dudman, one of the witnesses who has recently testified in this trial is a man named Riel Son. and he was the deputy chief of the Tram Kok District Hospital in Takao Province from 1976 to the end of the Khmer Rouge regime. Tram Kok District was the location of the Labo Cooperative, one of the sites you and Ms. Becker were taken to. And on the 17th of March this year in this court, reference, Your Honors, at 11:08 through 11:14 of that morning, this witness testified that in the latter part of the regime, so the time period you were there, the number of people dying from malnutrition got worse because people did not have enough food to eat, and there were about 5 deaths every day in his hospital from people suffering from malnutrition whose bodies were swollen. The hospital, by the way, where this was taking place, was only about 12 miles from the model cooperative you visited, Labo. My question, is this the type of information as a journalist you would have liked to obtain if you had been allowed to visit a hospital, to see patients who were sick, to speak to health officials during your trip?
Absolutely. That's what I would have liked to have found out.
President.
Mr. President, I object to this question. It is this question is asking for speculation of the witness, and I think it's not appropriate to ask such a question to the witness.
If I may respond, Mr. President, Mr. Dudman is a journalist. We're asking him about articles written. He's written directly on this very question, that he wanted to go and visit hospitals but was denied. I think this is an entirely important and relevant subject to pursue.
President, in this case, the International Deputy Co-Prosecutor can put such a question, and the Chamber wishes to know about this point as well. And for the Defense Counsel, the Chamber has also allowed you to put some question as well to Mr. Dutman. You may now proceed, International Deputy Co-Prosecutor.
So the record is clear, Mr. Dudman. Could you repeat your answer to that question?
Will you ask the question again?
The question is whether this is the type, the information that I read to you, whether this is the type of information you would have liked to obtain if you had been allowed to visit a hospital, see patients, and speak to health officials in democratic Kampuchea.
Yes, it is, exactly.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Dudman, with respect to issues like food supply, work conditions, health of the people, that in many respects, what you saw during your trip was what the Khmer Rouge officials allowed or wanted you to see? Is that a fair statement?
I don't think completely fair.
What would you say? Let me put it to you another way. Did you have any way of knowing or verifying whether cooperatives and work sites to which you were taken were representative of life, of what life was like for most people in democratic Kampuchea.
I could not be sure that they were representative. I suspected that they were putting their best foot forward.
Now, in the same article that I was just quoting, your article titled, "Is Cambodia Starving?" E305/12.58, you also wrote the following, quote, "Even the most complete figures on rice production, health, and nutrition would say nothing about the human price at which production has been expanded. This price includes the forced emergency evacuation of Phnom Penh and other cities, the strict regimentation of those who survived, and the concentration on agricultural production at the expense of freedom to learn, read, travel, and practice religion." End of quote. Could you explain to the court a little why you wrote that the expansion of agricultural production had been at the expense of some basic human freedoms?
I don't recall what led me to write that.
You also wrote in this article about how during your trip, officials from the regime showed off several new dams, including what you described as, quote, 3 large concrete structures that they said had been built on a crash basis by thousands of workers using only their hands, end of quote. Mr. Dudman, do you remember anything about those dams? And if so, can you provide to the court your recollection and impression of the dams and what it would have been like to have built those dams by hand?
I don't have a direct recollection after all these years. I wrote what I saw and what information I could get, but I can't go beyond the text of what I wrote.
Let me ask you one more question on this subject, and I'm referring here to a different article titled Cooperative, which is in document E305/12.54, English at S00014149, Khmer ERN 01063272. In this article, you described the meals that foreign visitors were provided, and you described them as follows, quote, "Lunch and dinner almost always included 2 big flounders or other fish, a big platter of either prawns or lobsters, and either chicken or chunks of beef or pork, plus a big casserole of light Cambodian steamed rice. Salad was sliced cucumbers and boiled eggs. Chinese snowflake beer was the usual beverage." End of quote. Do you remember receiving meals like this? And can you tell us where it was that you were fed meals like the one described here? Did you hear my question, Mr. Dudman?
I heard your question. I don't know I don't really remember where I had those meals. I'd be surprised if I didn't say in the story something about where it was.
And I just want to clarify, did you observe that ordinary Cambodians in democratic Kampuchea were receiving meals like this?
I'm sure they were not.
I'm going to turn now to my next subject, and that is the treatment of political opponents or enemies by the Khmer Rouge. In the opening paragraphs of an article you wrote that is dated 26 December 1978, the article titled "Conformity, a Must for Survival in Cambodia." This is document E338.19. You wrote, and I quote, "The Cambodian version of communism has no place in it for anyone who wants to read, write, or even think independently." End of quote. You also stated that the Cambodian Revolution had made conformity a condition of survival. Do you remember, can you give any explanation to the court, Mr. Dudman, of what you saw or learned during your trip that led you to write this?
I can't remember how I came to write that.
In the same article, E338.19, you also wrote, quote, "The Cambodian Revolution, surely the most extreme in modern history, evidently has forced former upper and middle class city dwellers to conform to an austere standard of hard manual labor, no money, no mail system, no telephone service, no books, almost no individual property, no advanced education, little or no religion, none of the freedoms accepted or at least professed by most of the rest of the world. Social upheaval under the victorious Cambodian revolutionaries has gone well beyond the Chinese precedent at the height of the great proletarian cultural revolution." End of quote. Why did you say that the Khmer Rouge had gone beyond the Chinese cultural revolution?
I don't remember how I came to make that comparison.
In the same article at English 338.19 at English ERN 004444938, Khmer 01070497, you described how you had made inquiries to government representatives about reported systematic killings of soldiers and officials of the former regime. And you wrote the following about how Ieng Sary responded on that issue. I quote, "Ieng Sary, the Deputy Prime Minister for Foreign Affairs, did not seem to be denying the charges. He said in an interview that some killings could not be avoided, but that considering the complicated situation after the war, the Communist Party of Kampuchea solved the problem in a good condition and avoided many more killings. Continue quoting him. Maybe that is not your belief, he said, but we are responsible, and we grasp the concrete situation in our country. We carry out all tasks in order to serve the rights of our people and not just the rights of certain groups. End of quote. Now, you referenced that you had been allowed to conduct an interview of Ieng Sary. Can you tell us where that interview took place, who was present? Can you tell us a little bit about your interview of Ieng Sary?
I don't remember that interview.
President, thank you, the Deputy International Co-Prosecutor, and thank you, Mr. Richard Dartmouth. We'll take a 10-minute break, and we will resume at 9 a.m. Cambodian time. And Mr. Dartmouth, I don't really know what time it is at your side, but we will take a 10-minute break this morning, our local time.
Yep.
The court is now in recess.